Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And hello and welcome or welcome back to Meanwhile Here on Earth, broadcasting weekly on Mondays on KUNX Digital Broadcasting. Tonight, no monologue. We're going to go right into an introduction of our very special guest. Dr. Joseph Bushman has been a candidate for the United States House, for the Utah State House and Senate, and the Utah State Treasurer. His first campaign for the U.S. House of Representatives was in 2008. The others were special elections in 2017 and 2023, following the resignations of two of Utah's representatives in the U.S. House. His 6 campaigns over the past 15 years have focused on 2 issues. 1, freeing all witnesses and whistleblowers from any illegal non-disclosure agreements regarding waste, fraud, criminal activities, and evidence of human interaction with NTI, as in non-human intelligence, both technology and biologics. Joe holds a PhD from the Indiana University Media School and master's in finance from Purdue University and a bachelor's in marketing from Indiana University. He also did postgraduate work in Mongolian studies while on the faculty of Indiana University. After earning tenure as a professor of management, he left traditional higher education to develop online MBA finance courses for the University of Chicago's online MBA program and pursue his dreams of adventure travel, chasing total solar eclipses, trekking the Altiri Mountains of Mongolia, exploring his family's genealogy in Switzerland, giving TEDx talks, and serving on the staff of Burning Man, the Sundance, Napa Valley, and Sonoma Film Festivals, and driving the entire U.S. interstate highway system in a camper van with his wife and 4 children, now all grown, and throat singing. His lifelong interest is in cosmology. Nucleogenesis, and the possibility of extraterrestrial life led him to serve with 6 former members of the United States Congress on the 2013 citizen hearing on disclosure in Washington, D.C., first as the moderator and then as the member of the congressional panel, an event I'm proud to have been a deposed witness in. Bushman's research has been published in a wide variety of college textbooks and trade publications and presented to the American Psychological Association, the National Association of Broadcasters, TEDx at Burning Man, the Roswell UFO Festival, the Society for Scientific Exploration, Freedom Fest, Contact in the Desert, the Sonoma International Film Festival, and the SETI Institute Contact, Cultures of the Imagination Conference at NASA Ames near Mountain View, California. He also wrote the foreword to the terrific book, Roswell, The Ultimate Cold Case File by Don Schmidt and Tom Carey. Joe, welcome to Meanwhile on Here on Earth, finally.
Peter, that's a fantastic introduction. Thank you. You're using the French pronunciation of my last name, Bushman. My dad pronounced it Buchman, but my grandparents were Buchman. So I'll go with all 3. But once I started on the PhD, I thought Buchman was the better formulation of that. But whatever you call me, I'm happy to call you friend.
Amen to that. And as is the usual course here, because you are in the process of living a very fascinating life on a number of levels. And it's the adventure that you're on, the moral commitment that you have to the serious work that you do, is informed by a world-class ability to have fun and recognize that thing that you and I find so important in life, the next adventure, the good camaraderie that comes with travel, which I can't imagine life without the possibility of a next journey, around the corner coming up somewhere, ideally with, interesting folks. But to begin at the beginning, you live in Colorado, but where were you born?
Utah, actually. We were talking about Colorado. I overshot it. I was born in a small hospital in New Albany, Indiana, Floyd Memorial, in Floyd County, Indiana, named after Sergeant Floyd, the only member of Lewis and Clark's Corps of Discovery to die. Everyone else made it back alive, and Sergeant Floyd passed away there in either Sioux Falls or Sioux City. I keep getting the but they built a monument for him there. And that, by the way, was the #1 tourist attraction in the United States in the late 1800s. People,
oh my gosh.
Floyd. The memorial looks just like the Washington Monument, a fraction. But yes, I'm a Hoosier from the great land of Indiana, but just across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. It's pronounced as one syllable, Lowell, there on the Ohio River. And so that was kind of the metropolitan area, was Louisville, Kentucky. So Kentucky Derby, WHAS TV, the sunny side of Louisville there in southern Indiana. And had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. My dad was Marcus Welby. And boy, that dates us. Anyone in your audience that knows what I'm talking about is over 60, I'm sure. But, he had his office in our house. And he bought the house from the widow of another physician. So it was built as a home office, that old model of the doctor who you went to tell me had a room. Well, my dad had a waiting room and a couple of examining rooms, a consultation room. And he practiced medicine in the basement, is what I like to say. And then the hospital was about a block away.
Oh my God!
Over the last 60 years of my life, from the time I was born there, it grew like a cancer. This hospital just kept expanding and expanding. So eventually they bought the house. My dad retired. And then they tore it down. It was a lovely parking lot. Then they cut down the tree I planted when I was 6. Never forgive them. But now the emergency room of that hospital is standing right over the home, right in the space of where my home was as a child.
Well, if something's got to replace it, there's a poignancy to that. Tell us a little about your mom.
My mom was the best surgical nurse, maybe who's ever lived. And I feel that way about her. And so did every physician she worked with. I'll tell you the story so you get to know my mom.
Please.
She was the first surgical nurse hired by that hospital. And then when I was born, I kind of ruined her career. So she quit nursing to take care of me. And when I went off to school, she went back to work. But
you were an only child?
Yes. My mom had many miscarriages. I remember a couple of them. And then to jump ahead a bit, they brought in a foster child because they didn't want me to grow up alone. Oh. And that's a whole nother story. But God bless Robin, passed away a few years ago as well. My mom's passed. But my mom went back to work, but she couldn't do surgery because that's during the early morning hours. She went to work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. as the supervising nurse of the emergency room there. And this was before hospitalists. And so there were no doctors in the building. So these nurses did trauma care until the physician could get over there, which was often my dad, because we lived a block away. He could leap out of bed and walk there. Well, he'd grab me asleep, walk me over there, and drop me off in the emergency room to be babysat in the hospital ER. Now, I'm sure insurance companies don't allow that today, but this was a small town, and all these nurses wanted me to be a physician. So
I was going to ask you, was there a gentle push there from the family or the community?
No, not at all. It was a shove. It was child abuse.
How dare you not follow your father?
No, and I didn't understand any of it. Blood? No, I just Well, I have these vivid memories from the early 1960s, emergency room. I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. And some of it was fun. They would have me wheel a patient to X-ray or whatever. And a lot of nights were boring. But I can, oh man, Peter, I have this vivid memory of a man coming in on a stretcher with a broken off, dark colored wine bottle, greenish, sticking out of his stomach, blood coming there. Somebody had knocked the bottom off a bottle and shoved it in this guy's stomach. And so I see this, it's like out of a horror movie.
Absolutely.
And they wheel him in. And guess what my mother and the nurses say to me? Joe, come over here. You can watch us sew him up. I did not go. I don't know what they were thinking. So anyhow, I didn't expect this to be the stories I'd be telling to you here on Meanwhile Here on Earth, but this is what Earth was like.
It is here on Earth.
Oh my goodness. I helped an orderly wheel a dead woman to the morgue. And that's where, as a small child, I learned that someday we're all going to turn purple. And rigor mortis is a temporary thing. And when we hit the bump going into the morgue, she belched, right? A sound I'll never forget.
Because she was dead, but she was alive.
She was very dead, but there was gas happening. So why do I need to know these things as a 4, 5, 6-year-old? But every day around the dinner table was a discussion between my mother, the surgical nurse, and my dad, the primary care provider, about some disgusting thing. And then it was past the cream peas, seriously. But I want to tell you about my mom. All that was just background. That's just fluff. So we're walking home one morning at dawn around 7 a.m. when she got off work. And the hallway leading toward the exit that was closest to our house was all a glass on one side. And I could see the sun rising. And my mother says to me, Joe, you have the hands of a surgeon. I think you should grow up to be a surgeon. And I said to my mother, and again, I'm maybe 7. I said, Mom, I could never stick my hands into somebody else's body. I can never put my hands in there.
That's a problem if you're going to be a surgeon.
Yeah, that would slow you down some. So my mother says, oh, son, you don't understand. They're not my hands. I'd said to her, how can you do that? How can you put your hands in another human being's body? And she said, oh, you don't understand. They're not my hands. You got to understand, Joe. Every time before I go into a surgery, I find a quiet corner of the hospital and I pray, dear God, I know I can't do this. Let me be a tool in your hands. And so my mother took her nursing career as a Christian calling to try to do good in the world, to try to save lives. And they weren't her hands. And so she was a terrible cook, awful. Just wouldn't taste anything, wouldn't season anything. It was all boiled till it was sterile and then served as a lovely meal. The whole house was
as a rule. You ate home as a rule.
Oh, we ate home. Yeah. Never. I didn't know what Chinese food was till I was in college. I didn't know there was such a thing. I had no idea. We never ate out. Never had Mexican food. If my dad was gone, we'd have tuna. He couldn't stand the smell of fish because of being on a ship during World War II. It made him sick. So yeah, it was all meat and potatoes and Indiana corn. Maybe spaghetti was Italian food, right? Chef Boyardee out of a can. Yeah, that was as ethnic as we got. Now, are you from New York? Did you grow up there?
I am.
Yeah, so you have everything.
I am born and bred in New York City, and yes, spoiled rotten in that sense. And these things, it reminds me at the very end of the movie Goodfellas, when dear Ray Liotta sticks his head out of the suburban door in the home that he's in the witness protection, and the voiceover is, I go to town, I ask for spaghetti, and I order linguine and clam sauce, and I get egg noodles and ketchup.
I wouldn't have known the difference either. Did you see that movie, The Big Night?
Yes, Stanley Tucci and Campbell Scott. A wonderful
film. They're
film.
making a timpani, right? A giant, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it as poorly as you did my last name, but whatever that thing's called. I
also want to say I'm usually very good about remembering to ask people how they pronounce their name, and that one little detail eluded me tonight. But yeah, that's something that's usually easy folks in your lives to avoid by asking first.
I
Yes,
have a
this
dear
film, by the
friend
way,
in I have a
if
dear
you
friend.
are a film lover, or even if you're not, if you love food, if you love Italian food, restaurants, this is such a sweet, independent film about two guys who have a wonderful little Italian restaurant, and it's dying, it's going out, it's the last meal, and they're going to make it something that their town never forgets. And both actors, went to school to master certain aspects of being chefs, and it's just a love letter to wonderful cooking and nostalgia. And we're off on a tangent here, but being that we both actually love films and love good food, you to make up for certain that the love that you had did not displace the trauma of neutralized food as a child.
So there's this great. This reminds me of my mother. The Big Night. Everybody go watch The Big Night. It's part of that. That's part of that wonderful little cul-de-sac of cinema that's about cinema related to fine dining. Roger Ebert and I exchanged emails about fine dining in cinema, but that's another
Oh,
story. So we're at the Big Night, and they serve up this just fantastic feast, and it's that religious experience of divine dining that can't be communicated, that takes you to another level of
yep.
gratitude and joy. And there's this woman with her head on the table just sobbing. Do you remember this scene? And they're like, we're sorry we didn't meet your expectations. Oh dear, why are you crying? And she just looks up and says, because my mother never learned how to cook. And I knew that feeling. I was her. My mother was wonderful.
I was going to say, made up for it in other ways for sure.
Oh, tremendously.
Joe, you have lifelong interests in the subject of UFOs and their implications, the truly anomalous ones, and this is something, of course, that has informed your politics, but also the world of film. And I'm curious to know, first, were you much of a reader as a kid? And at what point did reading as a passion catch on for you as opposed to something you had to do for school?
Yeah, the first real book, I remember kind of a young person's book called No Children, No Pets that I read. And, it's funny, I mentioned that to our oldest daughter, and she gave it to me for Christmas like 10 years ago. She found a used copy, and it's printed on acid paper. So it's literally just
Oh,
crumbling.
yeah, like
But yeah, don't print
oh,
on newsprint.
yeah.
And I was rereading it a while ago, but the first big book I remember was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Me too.
You're kidding. That was your
No,
first
in
book?
fact, I can go in the other room and bring you my father's 1930 copy, reprinted from a 1920 edition that he read when he was like 10 years old and gave to me when I was 8 years old, with his handwriting at that age written in his address
Oh
in
my
Queens, New
goodness.
York. And I dutifully, this is again a lot of years ago, copied my address directly below his, but it came with, my parents were extraordinarily fair-minded people and grew up, raised my sisters and I to be colorblind for all intents and purposes and judge people on who they were, in part based on their experiences growing up. But my dad talked to me about that. Uh, well, actually, I'm off on a tangent. The second book was Huckleberry Finn, but 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was the first movie I went to see, which I saw with my grandfather at Radio City Music Hall when
Wow.
it came out. And I think now, the power of film is one thing. And if you're a child, your imagination, and depending on what you're introduced to. But there I am, six or so. And the story, of course, we all know. But there you are contemplating, this is about this really smart, interesting guy with his crew, and they built this submarine, this boat that goes underwater. And what it does is it kills ships and the people on the ships whose job it is to kill people in wars, so that they get killed first before. I remember that mind-boggling aspect to it. And then it's the off on the tangent. My dad gave me again, like his 1920 copy of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was the copy that I got to read with its fragile pages and wonderful, illustrations. I've taken over this tangent. What a great introduction to the world of reading. Did it take you into the world of science fiction or science?
Well,
or
it's fortunate that I decided to read everything Robert Heinlein ever wrote.
Whoa.
And I say fortunate because the other one I was thinking about was Isaac Asimov, having no idea of how much Asimov
over
had written.
500 books.
Oh, this is impossible. I met him once in New York City. And let's go down another tangent then. I love New York City. I first visited there in high school in 1975.
Oh, boy.
Southern Indiana, they put us all on buses. They drove all these hayseeds up there. They took us to 3 Broadway shows and Radio City Music Hall. And we had dinner at Mama Leone's. Do you remember
Fabulous.
Mama Leone's?
All too well. All too
It's
well.
gone now.
I worked as a New York City tour guide on and off for years, and I had arranged more than one high school class's dinner there before
we probably met. I remember the tour guide. I don't remember him physically.
I wasn't doing it quite yet at that point.
I see.
Yeah.
So did you tell this joke? We're driving down to the Statue of Liberty, and the tour guide says, it's funny what you remember. I haven't thought of this in 40 years.
Very
probably.
funny.
He says, do y'all know why the lights are much brighter at the tip of Manhattan? Do you know why the lights are brighter at the tip of Manhattan? Well, Peter, you live there. Have you not noticed the lights are brighter down near the tip of Manhattan? Do you know why? They're closer to the battery. I remember this joke. We all groaned, of course. But I went up to the Crown.
As we still do.
Everybody, they've all turned off the show now. Nobody's listening anymore. Even Race is probably gone. But we went up the Empire State Building. I got in the Crown of the Statue of Liberty. What was it? So at any rate, I went back for years later. I was working at WAGT TV in Augusta, Georgia, and I was the promotion manager, and the broadcast promotion and marketing executives organization had a conference in New York City, and they had Isaac Asimov as a guest speaker. Can you imagine? And somebody had got him there, and I went. And he spoke on the future of television advertising, right? Asimov said, that the purpose of television is not to provide for entertainment, but to get people to buy products. That's the purpose of television. It's so obvious to me too. And he said, right now we intersperse commercials, but they interrupt the show. So the future of television advertising is to create commercials that don't interrupt the show, but are seamlessly woven into the fabric of the broadcast. And then beyond that, to create the commercial that provides a benefit that's needed at the time it airs, so that writers of television dramas, for example, will find techniques and video that will cause intestinal distress among the audience, right? And once you maximize
product,
intentional distress in the show, then along comes Charmin, the advertiser, with the toilet paper that you in that moment actually need, and now you're grateful for the ad that has. And he was just making it up as he went. This guy was amazing, and that's the only time I met him. And I recorded it. I took a cassette tape deck and surreptitiously recorded that. And some years ago, I digitized it and posted it to an Isaac Asimov page somewhere of his talk to the 1982 Broadcast and Promotion Marketing Executives Conference in New York City. Yeah.
You have, at a certain point, your life kind of branched into 3 passions, separate from family and people that you love: the world of politics, the world of extraterrestrial related activities interceding with politics, and the world of film. Which one really took hold in your life first of those 3 areas?
Cosmology and related to that, UFOs. And I'll leap ahead to today. I've heard you talk about being in therapy. and pretty intense therapy, I think. Hopefully you've talked about it publicly. You may have mentioned that to me privately, but I decided to take advantage of three. I can't talk about it. Free therapy that was offered me because in 1978 I was sexually molested at a Boy Scout camp. And I was 20, almost 21. It wasn't a big deal, really. I think the guy thought I was gay. I had talked to him about girls and things, and I was pretty inexperienced without going into every graphic detail, which I'm happy to do. I don't care. But I think he thought I was gay, and it wasn't coercive. But it was upsetting. And I was not interested. And I got it. We were talking in the car. I got out of the car. He drove away. And I reported it to the Scout executive, who at that time said, we know all about Larry. There's an investigation going on right now.
Don't worry about a thing and be quiet.
No, yeah, there's the be quiet part. This was a formula executives had been trained in. It was all lies. There's an investigation was a lie. We know all about Larry was a lie. They didn't care. And we really appreciate you telling me this. No, he didn't. But here's the kicker. You can't tell anyone else, or you might be responsible for destroying the investigation. So you've got to keep quiet so we can do our work. And if you tell anybody, he might get away with this. That's how that was the formula that from the 1920s, from the highest levels in the Boy Scouts. And by the way, the Boy Scouts is not a moral organization in my experience of it. And I say this as an Eagle Scout and a Lodge Chief of the Order of the Arrow, somebody who, and even after this event, I stayed active in national conference trainings and other things. But I went back to the Scout executive a year later, and he said, well, you can't even prove you were in camp, and Larry's going to sue you for slander if you don't shut up. So I did. And then 15 years later, I was on the faculty of the University of Tennessee, and there was a conference coming there. And Larry was now on the national board of the Boy Scouts of America and the Order of the Arrow National Committee. And he was in charge of physical facilities. And I saw him there, and it reactivated a lot of anger and it confronted me with what's the moral thing to do. I called some friends in scouting. I said, just forget about it. You're going to do more harm than good if you bring this up again. And I thought that's not me. So I wrote a letter, and next thing I knew, the national director of the Order of the Arrow, a guy named Alan Mossman, had flown up. Boy, I'm going down another tangent, but I want to tell this story. It's an important story to tell.
Yes.
And it motivates things like the UFO issue as well. And I'll tell you why in about a minute. So he interviewed me, the national director, and next thing I knew, Larry was permanently deregistered from scouting, which I think was an overreaction. My real upset, and this has come out of therapy now, is at the Scout executive. I trusted scouting, and I trusted the officials, and that was the bigger lie. Scouting conflated homosexuality and child abuse up until the 2015 or so, when they finally said that gay scouts could continue to be active in scouting and gay adults were welcome to serve as volunteers. And I supported that. I still do. But they conflated sexual orientation with pedophilia, and that was very damaging as well. So it's complicated. Well, at any rate, I saw a film. You tie all this together. The Church and the Fourth Estate, and this is a documentary about sex abuse in Idaho. Had a Boy Scout council up there that kept returning an abuser to the camp staff year after year after year. And it was because they kept forgiving him. And it was tied into the whole Mormon church thing around ecclesiastical, whatever, but they kept putting him back on the staff. Boy, I watched that film and I wanted to go find the Scout executive and wring his neck. So I told a bunch of friends of mine about it, one of whom is an attorney in Houston and very active in scouting, who said, call this number. I think you should go get therapy. And I thought, therapy? I don't need therapy. And then I realized I can't sleep. I'm really angry. And this stuff happened 30 years ago.
Doesn't matter.
So I'll go. So I've been doing therapy. All right. So one of the things I've talked about in therapy, and I just told the guy today, look, I want to explore this, and I don't want to build the Boy Scouts anymore for it. I'm trying to recover memories from when I was a sophomore in high school. And I think I sent you the files about this. But I entered a science fair in 1974. And I was fooling around with lasers and holography. And I won a bunch of awards in that science fair, including a couple from the Air Force. And here I am outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And one of the prizes was a free trip to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1974. I'm just a hayseed. I don't even know what that means. I'm just a kid with a laser. By the way, I think I'm one of the first human beings to discover that if you point a ruby red laser at the carpet and you have a cat, that this is fun. So I discovered that you had to plug it into the wall. It wasn't one of these little things you can put on keychain. It was about the size of 2 Pringles cans, one on top of the other. I mean, the tube itself, I bought from some science catalog. You have to get paper catalogs in order to.
Edmund.
Huh?
The Edmund kind?
Yeah, I don't. That doesn't ring a bell. What was it again? St. Louis.
Edmund Scientific. They made the catalog that I had ordered from over
so
the years.
I got the circuit board and soldered the power supply together and did the whole thing. And
you could have cut that cat in half with that thing.
Yeah. I wish I had saved it. The tube got cracked and I threw it away. I wish I'd kept it. But well, anyhow, I'm going off to Wright-Pat. And how that worked was 2 Air Force guys came and picked me up at my parents' home. And we drove over the bridge into Louisville and then up the interstate to Cincinnati and then on to Dayton. Yeah. And this is like the furthest I've ever been away from home alone.
So you went over the Roebling Bridge.
Back into Cincinnati, right? Yeah. Before we got there, we went over the John F. Kennedy Bridge first on I-65 and then 64 and 71. I forget the Eastern interstates. It's been a while. Anyhow, we're driving along, and this is unite politics and libertarianism and UFOs. The whole thing's coming together. And the Boy Scouts and the whistleblowing all forges into kind of my character, I guess. The one Air Force guy, we're driving along, and there's a military convoy of these old olive green deuce and a half trucks, 1.5 tons, big canvas tarps. And then there's these military Jeeps, all World War II era stuff, which wasn't that old in 1974. And a civilian car, I can still remember, it was a white 2 or 4 door sedan. It pulled into the middle between a Jeep and the big truck ahead of it. And the Air Force guy turns to me in the back seat and he says, that's illegal. I said, what's illegal? So it's illegal for a civilian to get in the middle of a military convoy. And I said, well, if nobody knows it's illegal, what's the point? And I still feel that way about it. We have so many laws we don't know about. There's research that says we all commit like 5 felonies a day without knowing them. So it's funny. I have a vivid memory of that. Well, before that, my advisor in scouting, a guy named Pete, I just talked to him today. He's 82. Great guy. Great guy. Still in Southern Indiana, radio engineer, private pilot. He had told me, he said, oh, wow, you won this award from the Air Force. You're going to Wright-Patterson. Ask to see the UFO that's in Hangar 18.
Had you ever thought about this subject before this?
Well, I don't think so. I remember, but I think it was after this. I got a cork bulletin board, and my mother would bring home Weekly World News, and I cut out all the UFO articles and pasted them to the bulletin board. And I remember one of them was this prophecy that I believed at the time, that 1984 was going to be the year that a UFO landed on the White House lawn, and stuff like that. I wish I had that. It got thrown away somewhere, before the hospital tore down the house. But I think that was after. Well, at any rate, so I'm in the back of the car and I say to these 2 Air Force guys, I'd like to see the UFO in Hangar 18. Peter, I have, and this started because I told you I'm
an innocent question that you really asked in earnest because you knew no better.
I mentioned an hour and a half ago when I started down a long tangent that I saw my therapist today. So here's what we talked about.
Love it.
I have no memory after that of visiting Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, of meeting other high school kids, of eating lunch, of seeing anything. I have a vague memory of being called aside and a wooden, like, army green chair. And somewhere in my life, I have said to someone, "Oh, I don't mind if you give me a shot. My mom and dad are always giving me shots." Right? I can remember that. I'm not sure it was it right, Pat. So I'm talking to my
Jesus.
therapist about it. And he says, and I've been talking to him about it for a couple of years, but I don't like to bring that up, because if I'm going to deal with the issues around scouting and the anger and the other stuff, if they're paying for it, they don't need to also be paying for this tangent.
Sure.
So I'm wrapping up the stuff with the Boy Scouts in the next
Oh, man.
few months, and then I'm going to start paying for therapy myself, because I get a lot of value out of it, and I want to explore this. And he said, "Well, on a scale of 0 to 100, how much do you want to recover those memories from 1974?" I said 100. Yeah, I'll pay any price, take any modality, send me to a professional or whatever. And he said, "Well, you ought to try ketamine," and with a psychiatrist friend of mine.
Sure.
And so a couple of years ago, I did that. I did one session. Wow. This was in a psychiatrist's office with a nurse monitoring my blood pressure, controlled dose, and all that. I had this amazing dissociative experience that I can tell you about later, but no recovered memories, other than I do think I was called aside. I do think asking about the UFO in 1974, they wanted to know where I'd heard about that. And then my next memory is very vivid. On the way home, I wake up in the back of the car, and I think they kind of woke me up to ask directions to get to the house. It's before GPSs, right?
Sure.
These are Air Force guys. New Albany, Indiana is a bunch of convoluted streets because two different cities grew together, and the streets didn't match up when they did it.
And what's your age again at this moment?
So I would be 16, 15, 16. You've got the paperwork with those dates on it from the Air Force. I didn't look it up just now. So April 74, probably just turned 16 in January.
Continue.
If I remember right. And so they said, "Hey, do we turn left to get to your house? Is this where we turn left?" I said, "Yeah, that's right." And this guy says, "Don't say that. If you're giving directions and you say that's right, that can be very confusing. You need to say that's correct." Okay, so Peter.
Interesting memory.
20 years ago, I'm telling this story around a campfire somewhere at a Boy Scout thing. And I said, "Isn't this interesting? I got this clear memory of the drive up and clear memory of the drive back. I don't remember anything in between." And somebody, I don't remember who, I remember they told me they were in Army intelligence, something with U.S. Army involving intelligence. He said, "Well, you were chemically debriefed." I said, "What? No. They wouldn't pull a 16-year-old aside and aggressively drug them." And he said, "Oh, yeah, they had no sense of humor in 1974 about UFOs." And he said, "The reason I think you were chemically debriefed is the drug that was being used at that time. You have a very clear memory of at some point before it took effect, and then you have a very clear memory immediately after it wears off, but it'll wipe all the memories in between."
And Joe, you have, even now sitting here talking to me, reflecting back on this, you have no memory of what would have been at that time the most exotic, greatest adventure in, this legendary place. No man, how interesting, in a fabulously creepy way.
Fabulously creepy is wonderful, perfect, descriptive. So I told my therapist this, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely, you were chemically debriefed." And I said, "Well, on a scale of 0 to 1, I said, I'm 100. I want to recover the memories." He said, "Well, you're probably not going to be able to." And I said, "You think I was chemically debriefed?" I still don't know that personally I believe this. I suspected. I wondered about it. I notice I get a little jittery talking about it. But two other things. One thing I said to my therapist, "So you believe this more than I do?" He said, "Absolutely." And I said, "Why do you believe it more than I do?" And he said, "Because it's not the first time I've heard this." So he has had other clients. This is a guy who's a faculty member and author and a pretty good therapist with a long career, doing a lot of interesting stuff. And so it's not the first time he's heard the story. He says, "I know what drugs they would have used. I don't think you're ever going to be able to recover the memory, but why don't you try this ketamine thing?" So I did one experience of it, and the full protocol is to go for like 3 times a week for a couple of weeks, and then twice a week, and then do it over a month. And at the time, I was involved in this intense project, digitizing records for the Library of Congress,
Whoa.
which is another story. But it took me like a day to recover, and I thought, I don't have
Okay.
time for this, so I
Sure.
put a pin in it. But just this morning, we were talking about it because I knew I'd be on your show. So if any of your listeners have any information, I'm easily findable. Dr. Bushman or Bookman or Buchman at Gmail, drbookman at gmail.com, or you can just go Google me. It's out there. Probably find my phone number. Any of your listeners have any advice or suggestions or whatever, I'd love to recover those memories of what happened to me at Wright-Patterson. So, Air Force guy says, well, I thought you were chemically debriefed. And I kind of forgot about it. This wasn't something I thought about much over most of my life until 1998, we buy an RV. We're not Mormon or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and formerly known as the Mormons. They want people to say the full name now, and I respect that. So I'm not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I was teaching. I had the summers off, so I decided we should get our 4 kids out of Utah, and we should expose them to the rest of the United States of America. So we bought a Road Trek camper van, and off we go. And one of the first places we went the second year, not the first year, was down to Roswell, right? So I get down to Roswell in 1999. I met Walter Hott in his office. I met Glenn Dennis. He came out to the Road Trek because he was looking at getting a smaller RV, went through the museum, and realized that I was asking about a UFO in Hangar 18, I think 2 or 3 years before Stan Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel.
Of course.
I'm like, how did that happen? So I call up Pete. I say, hey, do you remember when you told me to go to Hangar 18? So this is 1974. This is now 26 years later.
Yeah.
He said, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember you got to go to Wright-Patterson. I was really interested in that. So why do you remember that? And secondly, were you trying to get me killed? And Pete says, well, he was a pilot and he had a friend. His friend was a certified flight instructor, a CFI. And he said, it was his best friend. He'd since passed away, but his best friend went to the University of Louisville to all these early meetings of some UFO group. And he said one day he and his friend drove up to Dayton and were wandering around Wright-Pat trying to find Building 18. Turns out it's not Hangar 18, it's Building 18. And they got escorted off the base and told if they come back and do that again, it'll be trespass and that won't go well for you. Pretty much the same thing that happens if you cross the border of Area 51, right? You get thrown to the ground, $600 fine, and you're told if you do it again, it'll be a lot more serious. One of my friends, a guy named UFO Jim, has done that out in California. He showed me the letter he got. Anyhow, he said after that, for about 6 months, if he ever met his friend anywhere, they like to go to Frisch's Big Boy. I don't think it exists anymore, but the Big Boy chain in Indiana was known as Frisch's. Out west, it was Bob's Big Boy. Right. And in the South, it was something else. But he said they'd go there like at midnight, and they had these classic hot fudge brownie sundae things. He said there'd always be 2 guys with dark sunglasses and dark suits sitting across the table watching him for like 6 months. And I said, well, I want to talk to your friend. He said, well, it's funny. He died in a terrible accident. And he said they had the funeral so quick, I didn't even get to go. And he was flying a small plane and hit some power lines or something. But he said his friend had told him other things. He had been an air traffic controller and had seen things at unusual altitudes doing 90-degree turns at extraordinary speeds and all that. So that got me a lot more interested in what happened back then.
Did you start to read UFO literature or seek out individuals at that point, or just um, kind of file it in your mind and continue to pursue other avenues?
That's a really good question. I don't remember the details, but I want to wrap the Boy Scout anger at stifling a whistleblower and the politics and the UFOs into me.
Hmm.
And so by gosh, that's a really good question. When did I buy what books and what did I read? When did I start meeting people? Went to Roswell. Probably Roswell was the first UFO conference event
Well,
I
you met
went.
Glenn Dennis, for starters, a legendary figure in the work, and uh,
Yeah, I believe his story about calling up looking for child-sized caskets, taking that call and getting dry ice and all that stuff.
yeah.
Well, when did I first go to Roswell? Might have been as early as 2000, 2001. When was Hillary Clinton running with Barack Obama? What presidential campaign was that where Obama won his first term as president? Was that 98?
Was it? I think it was later than that. Um,
Okay. Well,
we'll
we
have to
got
do the math.
2012, whatever it was. Anyhow, I went to Roswell and met Ed Mitchell. I think Glenn Dennis and Walter Hott, I believe, had both passed away before then. But Ed was there. As a fun trivia question, the sixth man to walk on the moon was raised where?
Roswell, New Mexico. And I think he was the seventh.
You know, you might be right. Al Shepard came off first. I think you're right. Okay. Seventh man, Apollo 14, second one
Talk
off.
about minutia,
11,
but
12.
if it was you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 5 and 6. It was Neil Armstrong and then Buzz Aldrin. We should all know these names. Then it was Alan Beam and
Shepard?
no,
He's
Pete
84.
Conrad. So, all right, let's do a little NASA trivia. So the first man on the moon's Neil Armstrong. That's one small step for a man. Buzz Aldrin gets down. Do you know his first words? He says magnificent desolation, which got turned into a documentary by the same name. And then Aldrin tells the story about how he was the first human being to pee on the moon because he relieved himself into his urine bag.
Right, you gotta go. You gotta go.
If you wonder why I'm standing on the bottom of that ladder for so long, so I've met Buzz and I've met Ed Mitchell, and so then Apollo 13 didn't have. Well, Apollo 12 then was Pete Conrad, third man to walk on the moon. Do you know his first words on the moon? I'll tell you, and you'll never forget them. So you could not be an astronaut if you were taller than about 5'8", right? Because you couldn't fit in the capsule.
I never thought.
Tall guys weren't qualified, and then boy, if you weren't born in the late 20s and early 30s, you didn't have a chance to walk on the moon, right? That was the sweet spot for birth, for getting a chance to go to the moon. Conrad was the shortest of all the Apollo guys, so he comes down off the ladder and says, "Well, that may have been a small one for Neil, but that sure as heck was a long step for me." And the control room in Houston, they're all on the floor laughing.
And Neil said that line wrong. It was written to be, "This is a small step for exactly a man," and
so
there's
I
a big
believe
difference.
he said it. I think he was an Ohioan who said that was one small step for a man, with the A lost in there the same way you lose.
Oh, very gracious. Very gracious.
L-O-U-ville.
Fair
They
enough.
do that in the Midwest. And boy, there's another story about that. But at any rate, so you got Armstrong and Aldrin, and then Pete Conrad, and then Alan Bean, and then 13, didn't land. And then so 14, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth man on the moon is Alan Shepard. The sixth man on the moon is
so it is the sixth man. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I sit corrected.
Yeah, I was a college professor. It's just what I do. So I used to, by the way, speaking of college professor and knowing the names of all the guys who walked on the moon, I would ask my students, "Do you know the name of the last man on the moon?" Do you know the name of the last man on the moon?
Not offhand.
Yeah, and then it's funny. So I would talk about the advantage of being first in the marketplace and brand recognition and all that. And there's the
last,
first,
however,
first mover advantage. So I tie it into marketing, and then I would also tie it into a research design class. So I'll tell you up front, there are two equally correct answers to do you know the name of the last man on the moon? We think, how can that be? How can there be two equally correct? You think it's a precise question. It's a very imprecise question. So Apollo 17 lands on the moon in December 1972. And down off the LM, they got rid of the M, the E, Lunar Excursion Module. They renamed it Lunar Module because excursion sounded like they were having fun.
Woo!
That was really a thing at NASA. Huge controversy.
Yeah,
so down off the ladder comes Eugene Cernan. He becomes the 11th man to walk on the moon. And then the only civilian, Harrison Jack Schmitt, comes down, makes him the 12th man on the moon. Clearly the answer to the question, name the last man on the moon, you'll get the list of who walked on the moon. Number 12 remains today, Harrison Jack Schmitt.
Right.
Well, obviously that's the only possible answer. No. On the last EVA, Harrison Jack Schmitt got back into the lunar module, leaving Eugene Cernan alone on the moon. He says, I'm the last man on the moon. I know I'm the last man on the moon. There wasn't anyone else there with me before I left. So the two of them would have this fun debate about who was the last man on the moon. And the reason the question isn't precise, you think it is, it seems obvious. If you're at a party, what's the name of the last person to arrive at the party versus what's the name of the last person to depart from the party? What's the name of the last person at the party? Last to arrive or last to depart? Two different things. And so I would teach that around survey instrument design. You think you've got something precise, but you got to test these things because the respondents will read it in a way that you can't imagine. So I used to love to tell that story. Obviously, I still love to tell that story. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Where were we? So I said I'd tie this all together around the anger about whistle. Oh, so
yeah.
Now, I don't remember. I know I went to Roswell. I know I met Ed Mitchell. I remember him telling me a story he later said he didn't remember telling me, which was that he was up on his dad's ranch early in the morning on July 16th, 1945. And
45?
Huh?
45?
Yeah, 1945, July 16th, 45.
Okay.
About 5:30 in the morning, the sun rises in the west. And then later, the newspapers say there was a ammunition depot explosion, the government lying. That was the Trinity test. And so I remember Ed telling me that story. Maybe I got it conflated with someone else because he later didn't remember it, but by then he was much older. But I think Ed both walked on the moon and saw the light of the first nuclear bomb. July 16th, what an interesting day. I'll come back to that in a minute. But we know they lied about that, right? And there were good reasons for lying about that. They also, I don't say that we had the Trinity test. We bombed New Mexico. We irradiated an awful lot of Americans, and criminally, in my view. It was a rush, and it was wartime, and the debate about the ethics of dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and all of that is around some of the political issues I deal with too.
Joe, did you see the film Oppenheimer?
Oh, a couple of times now.
Yeah, I've only just seen it, and obviously very timely for what you're talking about, and unfortunately for this moment in history as well.
You know, the idea that they had a non-zero probability for setting the atmosphere on fire and ending all life on Earth, and they did it anyway, is so beautifully explicated in that film. And I've known that for the last 30 years from what I had read about that.
Yeah,
I've been to the Trinity test site. They open it twice a year.
The exchange was masterfully written, and that dark playfulness between him and the actor playing Einstein, a small chance, very, very minor chance that the atmosphere will burst into flame and destroy all life as we know it forever.
I pushed the button anyway. I mean,
small.
And then at the end of the film, and I guess I'll ruin the film maybe for people who haven't seen it. I don't know. I could tell you about it, but it's not the same as
well, you give me an opportunity as a host to say, I'm going to cut you right off there because we are out of time in our first hour. This is myself, Peter Robbins, host of Meanwhile Here on Earth. My special guest, Dr. Joseph Bushman or Buchman, or any other, there we go, a number of permutations on that great name. We will be back in 4 minutes. Don't leave.
Debbie Ziegelmeyer is an experienced diver, dive trainer, and UFO investigator who has researched sites around the world that have water-related UFO activity. We now know that even the Pentagon admits that there are unknown objects in the skies and underwater around the world. Debbie compiled an amazing book to catalog many of these sightings. The Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways, a reference guide to UFO, USO, water-related activity, has received rave reviews by UFO researchers and the public. The book is available at Amazon.com. Unlock the mysteries of the spirit realm with the new book, Meeting Wallace. In this channeled work by renowned psychic medium Larry Costa, the reader will delve into the profound wisdom of his spirit guide, Wallace. Together, they share the transformative journey of harnessing psychic powers from the celestial plane. Discover the extraordinary psychic gifts that have empowered Larry on his path, and immerse yourself in a thought-provoking and awe-inspiring read. Meeting Wallace is a groundbreaking endeavor, and it is a perspective seen through the eyes of a spirit guide. Discover the wisdom of the spirit realm alongside actual photographs of ghosts and spirit guides. Get the book Meeting Wallace by Larry Costa at Amazon.com.
While most near-death experiencers return to this plane of existence with alluring tales of their time spent in the presence of the divine, what happens when one crosses the veil into the afterlife, into the void? In the new book, Dying to Meet Them, Mindy Toutfest describes her journey to the afterlife after a devastating aneurysm, how a strange turn of events would lead her to spiritual growth, divine healing, UFO experiences, and a greater understanding of the universe. Get your copy of Dying to Meet Them today at Amazon.com or visit unxmedia.com for more information on this book and more amazing selections from UnX Media Publishing at unxmedia.com.
And we are back. We, in this case, being me, Peter Robbins, your host on the show Meanwhile Here on Earth. My special guest tonight, Dr. Joseph Buchman. Joe, you have exhibited a commitment to trying to get to the bottom about the truth about UFOs and their implications for humanity in a way that nobody I know has. 6 times in the past 15 years, you have run for public office with this as one of your two primary issues. And if you don't mind, I'd like the honor of reading into the record here a statement that you wrote that was included in last year's Utah Voter Guide. And had I wrote it, it'd be something I think I'd be very proud of. Quote, "The most important political issue of our time is our place in the cosmos. Questions from our childhood. Why are we here? And are we alone in the universe? Motivate this campaign. These are not only religious and scientific questions, they are now increasingly political. Why run as an unaffiliated candidate when you have no chance to win? Answer, to give voters the opportunity to bring attention to this issue by voting for the only candidate advocating for them. In July 2023, the U.S. House held a hearing with 3 military witnesses who testified to the U.S. government having recovered craft, bodies of apparent pilots, and evidence of a decades-long legacy program of reverse engineering. Programs funded by a seemingly criminal misappropriation of funds and outside of congressional oversight. As a lifelong libertarian and former chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah, I have consistently called for whistleblower protection for waste, fraud, criminal activity, and evidence of ET engagement with humanity. This revelation would, if confirmed, transform our society in much the same way as the Copernican revolution did 420 years ago. Imagine the possibilities. Ending war on Earth, new sources of clean energy, hope for a future of peace and prosperity."
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. I put a lot of wordsmithing into it. I forget how many words that is, but I was one over the limit.
It was just the right number.
What's actually published leaves out the word "for," the only candidate advocating them. I had to take the word "for" out, which I added back in what I sent you and everyone else grammatically. But I had to get one. I'm really proud of that statement.
Yeah.
It is my message in a bottle. I believe I'm ahead of the curve out on the envelope in terms of the urgency of this as a political issue. I know to my bones it's going to grow. I ran as an unaffiliated candidate because I'm distressed by the crazy turn the Libertarian Party took after its convention 2 years ago. I'm hoping that'll be righted at the next convention. I'm working for that. I am not a member of the National Libertarian Party right now. I want nothing to do with it, frankly. But the small L, lifelong libertarian, you'll note that one is small case, the other is large. That's intentional. I am at heart a libertarian, and I have friends who misunderstand that. To them, it means racist or greedy or selfish. The heart of libertarian political philosophy, and I know this as well as anybody on earth, because the project I mentioned a while ago of digitizing records for the Library of Congress were the 13 to 18,000 items, depending on how you count, in the personal papers of the founder of the Libertarian Party, a hero of mine named David Fraser Nolan. David since passed away. His widow entrusted me with those materials, and I got them preserved by the Library of Congress, where in a matter of weeks, they'll become available to the American people after the sessioning process that's gone on there for a couple of years. David was a political science graduate from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was a deep thinker. And classical libertarianism predates even him. There's a book called Libertarianism by Professor John Hospers, a professor in California. The core of the political philosophy arrives from the underlying paradigm of philosophy. And if you look at politics, as an academic, as a scholar, as a lover of wisdom, if you will, a scholar. Politics is a branch of philosophy. So is ethics. So is epistemology. So is morality. So is religion. So what are the core principles that motivate your religion and your ethics and your morality and your politics? There are only two. It's really very simple. And they're ones I learned from my mom and dad. You don't hit other people and you don't take their stuff. That's about as complicated as it gets. So philosophically, is there an ethics that can be self-evidently derived through thinking? And I believe there is. It is that no sentient being, no conscious being has the right to initiate physical force against any other conscious being. Mostly we mean humans by that, but we could also
Not always.
terrestrials. We could include some cetaceans. Some nations have granted the right of human rights to cetaceans because there's consciousness displayed by some of these ocean creatures that's quite intriguing. Or you look at John Alexander and his work on interspecies communication. It's fascinating. Well, let's just talk about humans now. So, do we have the right to kill an animal and eat it? Philosophically, yes. There are others who say, no, not even that. Well, back up. We'll be vegetarians. Well, I don't think that's as clear politically or drives the politics. If it did, it would get even weirder. But you don't have the right to initiate force against others, right? And that force means physical force, right? Or against the fruits of their labor. So if you're a human being and you're on an island or whatever, and you build a shelter out of materials and you put your work and your sweat and weeks to months of your activity in that, no one has the right to come take your house, right? That's the same thing. So you have no right to initiate force against another sentient being, against their person or their legitimately acquired property. Now, a thief who takes something, you have the right to initiate force to get it back. They've already initiated force by taking, so you're not even really initiating, you're recovering. Second core principle, and there's only two in the simplest version of this, is you have the right to this meat bucket this space suit that you're having this human experience on Earth. You should have the right to do anything you wish to do with this that doesn't violate the first principle of causing harm to others. So initiating force against others includes getting into a car drunk and driving. Like, you don't have the right to put others at the risk of imminent death. That sort of thing. But do you have the right to read anything you want? Yes. Do you have the right to listen to anything you want? Yes. Do you have the right to eat anything you want? Yes. Do you have the right to inject anything you want? Yes. Do you have the right to watch anything you want, see anything you want, pornography, whatever? So the libertarian view is yes, government does not exist to regulate or control vices, victimless crimes. Government exists to provide for national defense, to provide for some basic sort of court system to resolve differences where they arise, to punish those who initiate violence against others or their legitimately acquired property. So out of these two principles, the non-initiation of aggression and the right of self-ownership, the two together are sometimes called natural law in the field of philosophy. Well, I believe in those. And I believe in the politics that are easily and naturally derived from those. We've never had a nation state on Earth that was consistent with natural law. We've always given government the right to engage in forceful activity, the main one being taxing us. So you're a productive person, and the penalty you pay for being productive, of making profits, is to be taxed. The unproductive aren't taxed. So I don't know. It's a lurching evolution. We've left behind feudalism and the rights of kings and priests to control by decree of whatever they think their particular version of the 5,000 gods that are worshipped on Earth right now has told them to do. We've lurched away from that to at least some sort of reasoned republic, not a full-on straight democracy, but one limited from full-on democracy, the main limiting thing in the United States being the Bill of Rights, the rights of individuals against the majority, even if it's everybody else in the United States who votes to take away your freedom of speech. In the United States, at least, that's not supposed to happen. Your freedom to publish, your freedom to address the government for redress of grievances, your freedom to worship whoever you want, even if every other human being in the United States, every other voter says, I'm going to vote to take that away from you. No, our Bill of Rights says no. It's a limit on democracy. And so I said, to leap ahead a little bit, and I want to mention this name. A whole hour has gone by and I haven't done it. I am exceedingly grateful to Stephen Bassett. I went to my first X conference. I saw Steve in Roswell, and then I went to my first X conference in 2008. And to leap ahead a little bit, and now I'm feeling time pressure. How am I going to get all this in the next 45 minutes, apparently? Oh, my goodness. I said at the X conference, look, and I was running for Congress that year, 2008. I said, look, I am absolutely confident there are 0 Republicans and there are 0 Democrats anywhere in the cosmos, except for on this one backward planet. But if there are conscious beings out there that have developed technology or other ways of getting here, that means they have the non-initiation aggression principle at heart. If they have access to that kind of technology, they haven't used it violently against others, because in the long arc of history, declaring the right to initiate violence is suicide. Ultimately, you kill the others, you kill yourself. In the long arc of history, at least it's almost a religious belief that that's the way the long moral arc works. But it's also, you can look at our own history. Violent societies disrupt into violence.
Joe, I have to ask you,
yes.
You have been politically involved in the UFO story pre that point, more than half a dozen years ago now, that kind of marks what I'll call the end of the ridicule era, December 2017, with the publication of 2 landmark articles in the New York Times written by Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, and another Times reporter, Helene Cooper. And I'm imagining you have seen,
Pentagon reporter. I believe.
that you have seen firsthand a change in the attitude of people within the political community to some degree, now that it isn't hardwired into the Western psyche that simply saying or eliciting that you take the subject of some truly anomalous UFOs as representative of advanced technology under intelligent control from parts unknown, people don't immediately synapse that into an understanding that you're mentally ill, a huckster, a mystic, a con man, completely delusional, or looking for attention very badly. What I'd like to know, it's one thing to want to represent your political views in an active way, which you certainly have manifested in your life. It's another thing to take the secrecy, excessive secrecy around UFO, UAP phenomena and its implications seriously enough to be an active part of the so-called UFO research community. But to combine these two things and to run as a political candidate in the real grown-up world of politics in a recognized state in the United States and look toward national office, that's something else. What electrical synapse there happened to make you commit yourself to that level of the game?
I've got 2 answers, but I want to finish this thought because it answers that question as well. I'm at the X conference in 2008. I said there's 0 Republicans, 0 Democrats out there. But if there's advanced life getting here, they've got access to this technology. They haven't used it violently. It means they're libertarians. I've got to believe, and it's political, and if you want religious, I've got to believe that whatever advanced life there is in the cosmos over the long arc of history, and I'm sure there's every kind of life out there in various stages of development across the countless whatever's beyond trillions of planets, beyond the trillions of stars, trillions of galaxies, apparently. And I mean, the observable universe is like 300 billion right now, and we're still counting. Well, there's probably every kind of life out there, but the life that can travel, that could get here, that based on results hasn't eaten us, hasn't done anything mass violent. I know there's contactees and abductees and others who report pretty scary stuff, and I can comment about that later. But that if they're here, that they're libertarian, that they don't initiate aggression, and they hold the right of self-ownership as a core way of being. Otherwise, if we're going to say they're like us, if they're like the politics we have on Earth, then they could show up and say, hey, we have the right to tax you. We're providing real universal health care. We need the resources of the Earth to go, give health care to, people all across the cosmos. No, I don't think you initiate that kind of taking. I think they're patiently watching, probably relatively horrified, as am I, at the 13,000 nuclear bombs we have pointed at each other right now. We ended the last hour with that scene from Oppenheimer. They were worried they might set the atmosphere on fire. Yes. And you get the impression that Oppenheimer thinks they did. It's just got a really long fuse before some idiot sets off one of these bombs and somebody else sets off a few to respond. And the next thing you know, you set off all 13,000 and the atmosphere is on fire. Probably if you set off the first 100, the atmosphere is on fire.
No doubt.
So, okay. Politically, I'm an advocate for the non-initiation of aggression, the right of self-ownership, the politics that's easily and naturally derived from that. I gotta believe that as we continue to evolve, as we have left behind the rights of kings and priests and others to create a peasant class and a wealthy class and all that, or have we? I mean, the oligarchs in Russia versus the poor in Russia, oligarchs in the United States and the poor, I don't know. But at least historically in the past 100, 150, 200 years since the Declaration of Independence, the founding of this country, have lurched away from that. Maybe we sink back and lurch forward again, I hope.
Yes.
That's the politics I have to believe unifies the part of the cosmos that's in communication with each other. But I remembered something in the break. We bought the RV before I went to Roswell, the year before. I had been active on a forum on CompuServe for people buying RVs. And there was a gentleman there who very much encouraged me to take the kids while they were still young. And he just said he was a retired military guy. And we kind of hit it off. We exchanged a lot of emails. I didn't know a lot about him. But I said, yeah, we're going to do a quick trip. This was when the Road Trek was brand new, 1998. We're going to go to Cathedral Gorge State Park in Nevada, and then to Area 51, then to Rachel, where I met Joe Travis when he was still alive, and Pat, the owners of the Little Alien, Tonopah, down to Death Valley, Disneyland, up California, back home. And we're going to, get rid of stuff we didn't need and get things we do need. And then we're going to go on a trip all the way out to the Statue of Liberty and over Niagara Falls and home. That's what we did one summer. So anyhow, he says, well, if you're coming to California, look me up. Now, his wife later told me how shocked she was because never in his entire marriage had he ever invited a stranger to their home.
Oh, my.
So I get to his home in San Luis Obispo. And I'll talk about him openly now. I didn't for years. He passed away several years ago. His name's Chuck Clark. Interestingly, there was also a Chuck Clark who published the guide to S4 and Area 51 and Rachel. The same name. One has an E on the end and the other doesn't. All right, I get there. He's got a poster of Ronald Reagan from an old Western holding a gun. And it says, Dear Chuck, always remember it's not the size of the gun. It's the size of what's inside the man holding the gun that matters. Thanks for your service to our nation, Ron. I said, Chuck, Ron, how well did you know President Reagan? He said, well, I had the chance to brief him in the briefing room a few times at the White House. I said, what did you retire from in the military? He said, I was the chief briefing officer for the Joint Chiefs.
Oh, Jesus.
You can imagine the questions I had. So he says, listen, let's go out to my cabin in the woods. So off we go. My wife thinks I've met an axe murderer. We're taking our 4 children down a dirt road with overhanging trees that are brushing up.
Nice knowing you.
Well, he had 6 kids and 19 grandchildren, and every year he would run cousins camp. So he bought a property with bunk beds for 18
Good for him.
And he would hire counselors and do this camp. And so we're sitting there, and I said, he said, how's the trip? So well, we did this, we did that, and then we right up to the border of Area 51. He says, Joe, whatever you do, don't ever cross the border of that base. And I said, well, I mean, it's hard to tell where it is. There's a bunch of posts in the desert. There's no fence. They should
find out.
They should put up a sign. You two invented here. You know, they should have a visitor center. He just laughed. He said, no, seriously, you can't ever, if we're going to be friends, you can't ever cross the border of that base. And I said, okay, Chuck, but why? It's not like we're reverse engineering UFOs out there, is it? This was 1998. So that answers part of your question about what really fired me up. Yeah. Well, we'd been having this wild conversation about how we accidentally launched a shape into Mexico. He thought it went to Mexico. They were doing missile tests. He was second in command at White Sands for a while. A shape is a piece of concrete shaped like a nuclear bomb for testing the missiles. And they eventually found it had tumbled and it actually landed at White Sands. He was telling me about the Cuban Missile Crisis was a kind of a joke because after it all calmed down, the Soviets just put submarines under 6 inches of water with the same nuclear capability. We just didn't fight over it. I'm like, are you free to talk about it? He said, oh, that's been declassified. Well, okay, we're not really reverse engineering UFOs, are we? Boom, he stops talking. And he looks like he's going to cry. And he stares at the carpet. And I look over at his wife. She's staring at him. And he looks at her daughter, Haley, who was maybe 8, and says, Haley, sweetheart, you want help putting that puzzle together? So I feel terrible. So the kids all get put to bed. And I say, hey, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable in your own home.
Sure.
I apologize. I said, I don't know how to ask the question I want to ask, but in your whole career in the military, and he's a Roman Catholic, I said, is there anything that caused you to question your Catholicism? And he said, that's a really good question. And he said, I'm not going to talk about it in the way you want me to, but I'm not a Catholic because I believe it historically true. I just think there are certain values I wanted our kids to have. And that was a good platform to teach them. Yeah. Well, then over the years, we carried on an email exchange. And one of the fun parts of that, and the limited time we have left, Phil Corso's book, Day After Roswell, came out. So that caught my attention. And I read the book and I realized he was at the Pentagon the same time my friend Chuck was at the Pentagon. And I wish I had saved these emails. They were at my indiana.edu account. I'd like to think Indiana's preserved all those. I need to ask them. But yes. I wrote, hey, Chuck. I couldn't figure out how to ask the question. It took a while, but I love this question. If you were a librarian 10,000 years from now, do you think you'd be more likely to put Phil Corso's book in the fiction or biography section of your library? I forgot. First, I wrote him an email and said, did you know Phil Corso? And he said, yeah. Liz and I and Phil and his wife, was her name Dorothy? Whatever her name was. We would go to dinner from time to time. Why do you ask about Phil Corso? So he's published this book, The Day After Roswell. Would you be more likely to put it in the fiction or biography section in 10,000 years? And he wrote back and said, really love your questions. Look forward to having a lot more conversations about very many things. I think it would be best if we ceased discussion of this particular topic. I certainly know it would be best for me. Boom. All right. So if there's nothing to this issue, what on earth is that about? Second, I'd forgotten too. 1998, I had given a workshop at a Boy Scout conference at Iowa State University. And one of my participants was really impressed and was from the Houston area and invited me down there. So they fly me down. I do the workshop down there. And I call up a friend of mine who I had met in scouting, who had become chief of medical operations for NASA. And he says, good time. Everything's shut down. They were gearing up to fly John Glenn on that space shuttle mission. So whenever that was, it was about 2 months away. And he said, if you'd call me a little later, I wouldn't have been able to meet with you. But what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to go to the room where the moon rocks are and hold one. He said, yeah, I can't get you in there. I said, what if we go to the simulator and practice some landings at the Cape? He said, well, I've certainly done that, and we probably could, but I might get in trouble. Is there anything else you'd like to do? So I went all the way down to the last one on my list. I said, do you think could I sit in the flight surgeon's chair in mission control? And he said, yeah, no problem. So it badges me through. It's very disappointing. Mission control is a building that looks like a college dorm. It's just all cinder blocks and government paint, and then it's all antiques in mission control, because they don't do cutting edge tech, because it's too great a risk something can go wrong with like every upgrade I've ever done on Windows. So we go back to his home, and he said, what did you think? I said, it's all antiques. I mean, I'm shocked. And outside of mission control, and there's two mission controls, they have mirrored ones, both for backup, and then because they were doing the space station and shuttles back when we were partnering with the Russians on Mir, so they could have both active at the same time. I said, I guess all the cutting edge technologies out at Area 51. And he said, well, if it was, I couldn't talk about it. I said, have you ever been out there? I mean, yeah. And he's like, and I said, I mean, come on, Roger. It's not like we have flying saucers shadowing our shuttles on orbit, is it? Same thing as my other friend, just dead stop. And he says, before I answer your question, I've got 3 questions for you. Do you think I've ever lied to you? And I said, no, I think we both know that, morally straight in scouting used to mean you don't tell a lie. It wasn't about sex. Morally straight was being forthright and honest, and making up for the mistakes. It wasn't straight versus gay. That was a corruption of
different use of the word. I remember well taking that oath.
I do too, and I still believe it's important to be morally straight. I think this is a testing ground, life on Earth. I don't know for sure, but I act that way just in case. And then he says, do you think there's anything anybody could do to force me to tell a lie? I said, no, I think we both take this as important. Like, you just don't lie. It's okay. Then my third question is, where do you want to go to lunch? So off we go. And over lunch in a busy restaurant, he says, look, you got to understand, to get this kind of job, you got to sign certain pieces of paper that basically eliminate the Bill of Rights. If I were to share about some things that I think are important, even with my own wife, they would find out. I would go to a place worse than Leavenworth. My spouse would lose the health care and pension benefits. Please don't ask me about UFOs again. So both of those things got me kind of fired up. And neither one of them, neither Chuck nor Roger, as far as I know, has ever shared anything that violated any non-disclosure agreement. I hope I don't get them in trouble for talking about this stuff on podcasts. It's not the first time I've shared those stories. But you asked me, what got me interested enough to run for political office on the issue. That's why. I wanted to free my 2 friends to be able to talk.
Yeah. Perfectly stated.
I mean, I've talked to Don Schmidt, and if you want to read a longer statement, similar to what's in the voter guide, it's my foreword to Roswell, the Ultimate Cold Case.
And a very important book that is.
It is. And I wrote in there about the difference in running in 2008 versus 2017.
Can you tell us, can you characterize that for us? Because, of course, 2 very different eras in the world of our modern age of UFOs.
So in 2008, I got a call. Well, in 2008, I was a trainer for these personal development training companies, things related to LifeSpring and Landmark and developing personal mission statements. And I'd gone through all those trainings and some of the mastery trainings where I got hired as a trainer. I worked with troubled teens in Oregon and other places. And I loved that work. And I
actually, some years before that, did workshops with Stuart Emery, who started, actualizations, which was the precursor of Landmark.
Right.
I also worked with Warner Earhart briefly. I went through the entire workshop series, and what a special mind you have to do what you were doing there.
So I've been around people who work directly with Warner and respect a lot of his work, as well as Dr. John Handley, who founded LifeSpring, and then Alexander Everett, who did Inward Bound, I think, and Holiday Magic was an Amway-like company Yeah.
Stuart really impressed me.
Yeah. We got to talk about that another time. But so I started looking at myself, what have I done to make a difference in the earth? What do I think is important? How could I make the largest positive impact for humanity with whatever time I have left? So
and you're still working on raising a family, earning a living, having a marriage, paying a mortgage, that kind of thing.
I wasn't as good at those other things
but you were doing them.
I was doing them, and we have 4 highly successful kids, and my wife still loves me, but staying married was not always guaranteed. There were some rough times in there, but we're doing great for the last decade or so.
That's great.
And anyhow, and she was here. It's this crazy guy running for Congress on UFOs, right? Well, in 2007, I put up a website because I realized if the ETs are here, I don't need SETI. And I've hung out with Seth Shostak. I've done presentations at that NASA Ames conference and all that. I have respect for SETI. Steve does not. We argue about that sometimes. But anyway, you don't need a big transmitter. If they're here, they're downloading the internet. They know everything that's on it. If you believe some of the contactees, they read our minds. They can send messages to us without vibrating air. They know humans. They certainly know everything on the internet. And they got artificial intelligence that can grok that, to use a Heinlein term, in a nanosecond. So I put up a website, and it's still up. I need to do more with it. www.thepeopleofearthapologize.com. So I took it upon myself to apologize to whoever's grokking the internet for all the crap that's on the internet, all the violence, all the death, all the destruction, the 13,000 nukes that we have crazy people with their hands on the buttons pointed at you and me right now, all of that as a start. Because where would you start a conversation with an infinitely wise, non-aggressive libertarian alien? Well, I think it's the same as when I see the kids when they were little, they pull all the pots and pans out of every door in the kitchen and have a fun party, and you discover it and they look up at you. And I know as a dad, what I wanted to hear was, I'm sorry, we've made a terrible mess, haven't we? Can you help me make this right?
Good one, Joe.
That's my conversation with aliens. So then I get a call from the chair of the Libertarian Party of Utah at that time. A friend of mine who was just on our home for the last 4 days came up here for Roots Tech, at any rate, a genealogy conference in Salt Lake. So Rob says, we'd like you to run for Congress. We think you'd make a great libertarian candidate for Congress. I said, I'd love to, but maybe you want to look at the website I put up last month, The People of Earth Apologize. He goes, what? Let me get back to you. So a bunch of them looked it over and they said, you know what? This is serious stuff. This is very libertarian. I think you're right. If aliens are here, they got to have the non-aggression principle as a core value. Obviously, or we would have been toast in the 40s or whatever. So I ran for Congress in 2008. I called up Bassett. He invited me to the X conference. And that's where I said, there's no Republicans, no Democrats. If the universe is full of life, it's got to be non-aggressive. We call them libertarians if you want. Left-leaning libertarians by today's terminology, because the way the National Party's gone nuts. But where was I? So I ran, and you asked me the difference from what happened with the New York Times, the tipping point. 2008, I was made fun of. The Salt Lake Tribune, I announced my campaign for Congress at the National Press Club at the end of the X conference under a banner that said, it's not about lights in the sky, it's about lies on the ground. The convention in Utah to nominate me for Congress was happening at the same time as Bassett's X conference. So I didn't know I was going to be the candidate until that night. Next day, we go to the press club. I get to announce I'm the candidate. I'm running. KSL radio played alien music and laughed at me, and it was totally goofy. The Park City Record ran a front page article, Immigration, Taxes, and Little Green Men. I think I sent you the PDF of that. But it was a fairly good article, actually. Yeah. It was libertarian with a twist, Joe Buchman, first run for office. Yeah. But I believed all that. I want Congress to hold hearings on waste, fraud, criminal activity. I want them to balance the budget as a start, and then we got to deal with a massive debt somehow that we don't pass it on to our kids. Yeah. And on the ET issue. And it just seems obvious that this would be a cure for a lot of what ails us. Well, then I did the 2013 citizens hearing, and a story we don't have time to talk about. But I helped make that happen by recruiting 5 out of the 6 former members of Congress.
Yeah.
Steve got Carolyn Kilpatrick. I got everybody else, including Senator Gravel, the guy who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record.
He shined like a star that night.
Oh, man. And I can remember you in the audience and as a witness there as well. I think I gave you the oath. I must have. I gave it to all of them.
That's right.
And good Dr. Greer lied to me after I gave him that oath. But that's another story. Not everything he said was, anyway, Greer is complicated.
He is
20. Yeah, we could do 3 hours on Greer alone. Anyhow, 2013, it was still kind of ridicule, right? And they published a dismissive piece, and then they got blowback. And actually, that was sort of the beginning. 2013, they came back to the New York Times with a somewhat serious piece.
Yeah.
But no, it was December 2017, December 16th, 2017.
I remember if Blumenthal wrote that one, he wrote a number of pieces leading up.
Well, when I ran in 2017, it was completely different.
Yes.
I got in 7 debates with now Congressman Curtis. I got no ridicule. And I wrote about that in the foreword to Don's book, Don's book. The difference between the two, I think, in part was caused by the citizens' hearing on disclosure. I think Steve Bassett deserves some credit for that.
I do too.
And then once Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the Conway Daily Sun in New Hampshire and said if elected president, she was going to dig into the issue. And John Podesta was part of that campaign and saying, later saying that my greatest regret was once again not being able to open the UFO files under the Obama presidency.
Yep.
Well, anybody who wants to put you in a tinfoil hat now just is showing that they're not current with the news.
It's very difficult, and there's blowback to that now. And what I'm going to do is digress for a moment because between you and I, we have a number of images I'd like to share with our audience. They're not all in order, but as we go, you can lay them out. Who is this good-looking
That is
kid?
me. That is a young boy with his first videotape machine. That is an Ampex 1200
Damn.
quad videotape machine. That reel of tape on the left holds maybe an hour of NTSC quality video. Your iPhone will hold a lot more video. Plus, it's got the camera at a far higher quality, and that is an antique. But that's
and a portable model, I see.
$500,000, 1970s dollars.
I love it.
That's WTIU TV in Bloomington, Indiana.
Well, here's this letter that we have. Part 1.
Yep, there's the Air Force thing, and the date's April 1974. So indeed, I was 16 and February, March, 16 and 3 months old.
Congratulations from the United States Air Force. Holy moly.
Yeah, I've been congratulated by the Air Force.
That makes you one of the few people I know.
There's me and Glenn.
Yeah.
Wonderful, sweet, sweet man. If he's lying about what happened back in 47 in July, and then I'm a fool. No, I believe him absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the voter's guide for the 2008 campaign, District 1. Morgan Bowen is great. His wife brought all the kids from their homeschooling. They had a homeschooling neighborhood homeschool with like 40 kids.
Ooh.
And she came up to me a few weeks later and said, hey, the kids all voted on who they would like to see represent them in Congress.
Terrific.
Don't tell anybody, but you won unanimously. I think her kid voted for his dad, but other than that, young people have this hope for a future where maybe we could end nuclear war, the risk of nuclear war, maybe we could live in a kind of abundance. And maybe that'll be when we become peaceful enough to be invited to be a part of the cosmic community.
Yeah,
there's no ridicule.
Well, exactly. When we advance enough to stop beating each other to death with clubs over where the line is drawn in the dirt, a perfectly respectable Neolithic activity that we are still heavily engaged in, and this week being a superb example in 2 parts of the world and more.
Ray Bradbury wrote that wonderful book, or maybe it was an essay, Too Close to the Cave and Too Far from the Stars.
There's a title and a half.
That's where we are.
Too much.
Yeah, still beating up people with clubs, too close to the cave.
Like you, I have tremendous respect and admiration for our friend and colleague Steve Bassett. In creating the disclosure event in 2013, Steve had the backing of obviously an individual with some funds, a Canadian in this place, a philanthropist, who essentially gave him a budget to bring in, I think, 40 witnesses from around the world, to commandeer the National Press Club for, I think, 5 full days, to pay all of the members of the committee, so to say, that sat in judgment. Steve had tried to get, as you did, serving active members of Congress or the House, none of whom were interested, and specifically arranged the event for a week where they were off work, so to say, and none of them were interested in doing it. The event was superbly produced from beginning to end, and it's just a shame that, you know, it didn't have 1 billion people hooked up to it like a major sporting event or an award ceremony.
Yeah. Oh, there I am at that first X conference under the banner that we took to the press club, next to Alfred Weber, who I think invented the term exopolitics, maybe. Yeah, that was shortly after that photo was taken, was when I said, I think the universe is teeming with libertarians. That's when that revolution came to me. There we are at the citizens hearing in late April, early May of 2013. I'm on the far left. Merrill Cook, Darlene Hooley, Carolyn Kilpatrick, Roscoe Bartlett, Mike Gravel. I may have gotten Darlene Hooley and, I'm spacing on one of them. And then, of course, Danny Sheehan.
You bet. Can't miss him.
Oh, I've forgotten one of the names. Anyhow, and here the witnesses being sworn in. I'm giving you the oath.
You are. And
there's Stan
we
Friedman.
there he is.
Still with us.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. What a time he'd be having now.
Also, if you go back, there's Reuben Langdon there, and Reuben and Steve were full partners in that at the time. What happened after that is just awful. But
absolutely.
Why am I spacing the one Congresswoman's name? Oh well, Carolyn Kilpatrick, Darlene Hooley, and Lynn Woolsey. Lynn Woolsey from Oregon. Linda Moulton Howe, absolutely fantastic. Ryan Woods, Dr. Woods. Bob Woods. Sorry, his son's name is Ryan.
Yeah.
Is that Grant? Who's that to the left, to the right of Stan? Is that Grant?
It is, and is that Rosemary? Yeah, Rosemary Ellen Riley.
Yeah, she wasn't a witness. She's there in the audience.
Another one I missed tremendously.
Yeah. There's my laptop, my old Z180T ThinkPad with the titanium cover.
Now here's a picture that I was real proud to snap.
Yeah, Dick Gregory.
Yep. One of the ultimate activists of the 20th century. What a good guy.
Fantastic guy. Of course, Don and Kevin. Uniting and putting differences behind. And
absolutely.
Great team doing that original. There's Mike and Linda.
Yeah. There we are.
That's fantastic. That's all the witnesses, none of the panel. So I'm not in there. Roger Lear is gone. Jesse Marcel is gone. Stan's gone.
I think.
Is there anyone else that's in memoriam?
I think everyone else is still with us in that picture.
Yeah.
To the best of our knowledge.
Anonymous passed away. Not in the picture, but one of the witnesses. There were 43 witnesses, by the way.
Yeah.
I count Steve Bassett as a witness. There's the contact culture. So NASA actually did this. I think they're not going to do another one. The Joe Fierro, the guy who kind of drove that, has passed away, and COVID kind of killed it. But I actually got to go there and present about the citizens hearing. I was taken seriously.
Excellent.
Seth Shostak just dismisses all eyewitness testimony. He thinks we should for murder trials as well. He thinks the only science is science that can be replicated, whatever. Steve thinks he's part of the cover-up. I think Seth's just siloed like a lot of those academics, but I was treated with respect. And there's the first place science fair award. Does that say 10th grade?
That's fabulous. What a
Yeah.
great artifact of your life.
Yeah. We went to the same auditorium for the statewide presentation as Homer Hickam did in Rocket Boys.
Oh gosh.
Same,
Okay.
same venue. Yeah. And this is what happened. So the
Whoa.
blowback I got in 2008 was more from inside the Libertarian Party than from
Jeez.
the Democrat or Republican.
How sad, and how human nature.
Yeah.
What we don't know, let's make fun of or fear. Take your
To
pick.
be fair, a few years earlier, there was a candidate in Montana who took some chemical to turn his skin blue and ran as a libertarian lizard. So,
Cute.
okay, I get it. Maybe you want to have some vetting, but national parties can't control their candidates, right?
No.
You can see this. Eisenhower spinning his grave over Trump. I'm sure FDR spinning his grave over Biden. Political parties cannot decide who gets to run. They go through the primary process, you can get on the ballot, whatever.
Incredible.
You can't stop that. But there I am at I think at Brigham Young University, wearing my libertarian gold tie, got the yard signs. Yep.
Made out of real gold, right?
Yeah. No. But we would like to return the monetary system to a gold standard, I think.
Yes.
Austrian economics, I think, provides the most wealth for the most people the fastest, but it's debatable. Keynesian hasn't completely hit the curb yet. There's the headline from the Park Record. My kids go to school the next Monday. Or this came out on Wednesday. I guess they went to school on Thursday or Friday, and the teachers were ridiculing them about their crazy dad. But that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Candidate
changing.
wants feds to reveal information about aliens. Oh, you're so crazy. What a funny guy you are.
Yep. No, I don't want the feds to reveal the information. I want the illegal, unconstitutional, non-disclosure agreements thrown to the curb and witnesses free to testify to Congress. But okay, you can turn in the feds reveal one. There I am at the science fair, scared to death of that girl standing a good 3 feet away from me. Just terrified. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was me, the geeky kid with the laser. April 1974. There I am at the SETI Institute, or at the SETI.
Both of you showing great respect for each other.
Yeah, I like Seth a lot.
You've got to laugh at times. I find him incredibly annoying, and at the same time, I know he's not a bad guy, but
oh my gosh, I'm wearing the same black shirt and the same tan pants right here at the radio show. My fashion style knows one note on the piano, apparently.
Or you spoke the night before. What are you going to wear? I don't know. What are you going to wear?
Yeah. Yep. Utah Joe.
Is that link active right now?
No, it's archived at the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. Okay. So I just talked to my webmaster. It's just and so this is Congressman Curtis, who I debated 7 times. I have met with him in DC annually since he got elected in 2017. Huh. Last time I went, he had to cancel and we rescheduled. He was very apologetic. And part of making up for that, if you go back to that picture, do you know where that is in DC? That's the lobby of the Thomas Jefferson building of the Library of Congress.
Oh my
And
goodness.
once a month, they have a bicameral, meaning House and Senate, bipartisan, Democrat and Republican. Too bad we don't have our one libertarian there, Justin Amash. We could call it tripartisan. Yeah. But they do book talks at the Library of Congress with dinner. And he invited me as his guest to sit on the floor of the Jefferson building for a book talk by the author of The Emperor of All Maladies.
For gosh sakes.
I can't pronounce his last name. He's an Indian. Absolutely riveting book talk.
Yes.
And the federal government bought me a couple of glasses of wine and a lovely
Yeah. Well, there you go. Those taxes are paying off.
Yeah. Okay, this is a great photo. On my left is Bill Barucki. No, on my left is Frank Drake.
Yeah.
On the right of the picture. On my left is Bill Barucki. Frank Drake, the author of the Drake equation.
I was going to say, tell folks some people are not aware of his,
yeah, and most UFO folks aren't. And this is where maybe I'm a bridge. Barucki designed the ablative shielding for Apollo. He dropped out of the PhD program to do that. And then he argued that we ought to put a satellite in a trailing Earth orbit focused at distant stars that could measure the diminution and the luminosity of the star during planetary transits, that we had electronics good enough to do that. And he got turned down, turned down, turned down, turned down. That became the Kepler Space Telescope. Bill Barucki is the guy who is responsible for us knowing there's at least 5,000 now exoplanets. We got a couple of them through parallax by being able to see it from Earth, but it was Kepler. Those two gentlemen are absolute heroes. And I happened to get invited to the party in Mountain View where Frank Drake gave Bill Barucki the Frank Drake Award.
Oh.
So I wore a NASA shirt that I bought at the NASA Gift Center, not thinking that everybody thought I worked for NASA because I was wearing their shirt. I had to apologize. So that's also me at my heaviest. I started losing weight shortly after that.
Yeah.
I'm looking a little bit heavy there.
We're coming into our last few minutes. We're going to have you back at some point, Joe. But to jump in right here, why Burning Man, one of the great cultural icons of, I won't say the counterculture, but I mean, I'm almost answering my own question. Jump in there is actually a very good place to disseminate information and get better known.
Absolutely. I put random copies of the first day's transcript that I typed up at the citizens hearing, the Monday transcript. I listened to it, typed up every word, and I was going to publish that. I'd been promised the rights to publish that. Jeremy Corbell took them away because they wanted to monetize the video, and I patiently waited 10 years. Now they say I can do whatever I want with them. But now you've got artificial intelligence that can type that transcript up out of the audio with no effort. I don't know that you get the spellings of all the military bases right. This is where I discovered or stumbled across Dr. Greer. Initially, I thought he had made a misstatement about meeting with an Admiral Morin, who was an advisor to President Sarkozy. So I wrote the good doctor and said, I can't find Admiral Morin. So he won the Ampere Prize. I get a list of Ampere Prizers. There's no Morin. I write the good doctor. I said, it's like the congressional record. We're giving people the chance to revise and extend remarks. If you made a misstatement, haven't heard from him since. There is no Admiral Morin that he said we're meeting with right now. Hey, that little tangent. Burning Man. I went as an alternative to the Boy Scouts. I dropped out of scouting. I had friends of mine saying, you got to go to Burning Man. It's the largest zero impact, leave no trace event on the planet.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
I went the last year that you could get a ticket during the event. It wasn't sold out. If I had waited another year, I probably never would have gone to Burning Man. So I went out there a couple of days late. I had a deeply moving experience at their temple. It's not just all parties and drugs and the media distorts that the way they distort everything.
Sure.
There's incredible art. There's incredible people doing TED Talks and educational camps. And there's competitive gifting that's performance art based where the community really arises to really care for each other. And that's all I can do in a minute. After that, I joined the Burning Nerds. There's about 10,000 academics that go out and study Burning Man. Maybe 3,000 actively. But I joined the census team, and we attempt to random sample and measure who's going to Burning Man so we can give the Burning Man organization data about the economic impact and the value of Burning Man to the state of Nevada, and it's priceless. And it occurs out on a dry lake bed. I've gone out there at other times. The stars are incredible. It's one of the designated dark skies areas in the world. It is a dry lake bed that, like an artist's canvas, the art is created, it arises, and then like Shangri-La, we make it disappear.
Joe, in 1 minute, where can people see you next or hear you next, or what is your next adventure or self-assigned job, and where can they find or keep up with information on you?
Just Google me. I'm drbuchman@gmail.com. My phone number's out there. I haven't had any problems with that ever. I guess if I do, I'll do something different. Next up, Cindy and I are going to hop in that old van. Bought it new in 1998. Now it has 382,000 miles on it. Around April 4th, we're going to head south and look at the weather. We're going to find our way into Texas, and we're going to be in the path of the shadow of totality. And everybody needs to do that at least once in your life, to look up, see a black hole where the sun's supposed to be, see the corona shining out from around the edges of the moon. It's like a giant eye looking down at you from space. There's a 360-degree sunset. This one's going to last over 4 minutes. That's not coming back to the United States, North America, till 2044.
It's a perfect note to end on. And if all goes well, I'll be seeing the same thing from Rochester, New York, with Steve Bassett and Richard M. Dolan.
I will pray you don't have clouds. You're going to a very cloudy area, but I'll be in
very
touch.
possible.
Yeah.
Joe Buchman, again, thank you so much for joining us. We only scratched the surface. You'll be back, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said, or paraphrasing. This is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. I'll see you next week. We'll see you at some point in the future. Stay well.
Swagger down the street.